The moment that ended, it all didn't come with yelling. It came with laughter. You expect equity for that? Loren Beck, our CEO, didn't even look at me when he said it. He was too busy straightening his cufflinks in the reflection of the wall-mounted monitor. I was standing 3 feet from him, still holding the USB drive that contained the framework I'd spent 7 months building. No applause. No thanks. Just dismissal. He leaned back in his leather chair and added almost as an afterthought, "Come on, Nora, it's just a few lines of code." That line would follow me for weeks. It wasn't the words that cut deepest, it was the tone. Like I was a freelancer submitting a mock-up, not the architect of the software his company had just pitched as a proprietary cognitive mesh engine for decentralized clinical trials. His words, not mine. "My name is Nora Fielding. I'm 38. I live in Austin. And up until 2 weeks ago, I was the senior systems architect at Brixton Labs, a biodata startup backed by 3 VCs and run like a poker game, high stakes, low loyalty. I wasn't hired for flair. I was hired to solve the scalability problem they couldn't crack. The pitch was always clean. We gather real-time patient data through wearable sensors, translate it using our middleware, and automate compliance through dynamic protocol adjustments." Sounds impressive, right? It should. Because I wrote every engine behind that middleware. And now I was standing in the corner of the conference room while my code was being celebrated by a room full of investors who didn't even know my name. Loren was riding high. We had just walked out of a successful pitch to Halberd Ventures, a $12 million Series B ask. I had coded that demo for 36 hours straight, slept on the floor of my office, drank instant coffee that tasted like lint and regret. He knew that. He saw the lights on at 3 a.m. He heard my daughter crying during our late Zooms when I told her just 1 more week. But none of that mattered now. I asked just once before the demo went live. "Are we finalizing the equity agreement you mentioned? The architecture doc I gave you has my signature on it." That's all I wanted to confirm. That was when the smirk crept in. "Nora, you're overthinking this. Let's get through the pitch. We'll circle back." But he never circled back. Now the pitch was over. The VCs were on board. And Loren Beck had what he needed. Without breaking stride, he pointed to my own creation on the screen and said, "It's beautiful, right? My team's been working night and day." And just like that, I vanished. I didn't argue, didn't protest. I placed the USB on the desk, clicked it closed, slid it back into my pocket. He had the pitch, but he didn't have the foundation, not really. Because what Loren forgot or never understood is that the visible part of any product is the tip of the iceberg. The stuff that matters lives deeper, beneath, behind, between. The few lines of code he mocked. They weren't just syntax, they were architecture. Encryption layers, self-repairing protocols. They weren't visible, but they were critical. And he'd never asked me one question about how they worked. That's when I knew he wasn't stealing my work. He was borrowing something he didn't understand. And that kind of theft always has a timer. I didn't go home that night, not right away. Instead, I sat in the parking garage of Brixton Labs, with the engine off and the dashboard lights humming quietly, like the last signals from a satellite drifting out of range. I stared straight ahead and thought about the phrase, "just a few lines of code." Funny how 7 months of work can be reduced to a sentence. To anyone else, it might sound like tech jargon. To me, it was a slap disguised as insight. He didn't understand the system because he never once asked me how it breathed. He never opened the docs, never joined the late-night sandbox runs when data syncs stalled or when the predictive agent misclassified test groups. And now the VCs had bought in. $12 million committed, built on top of a thing Loren didn't even understand how to run without me. But the part that really stuck wasn't the money. It was that phrase, "You expect equity for that?" No. I expected respect. I expected acknowledgement. But maybe after 8 years in startups, even that was a kind of naive. I reached into the glove compartment and pulled out my notebook, the one I used during the earliest sprint planning sessions. The first page still had a sketch I drew over coffee one morning, 3 overlapping boxes labeled sensor layer logic, adapter, predictive core. That sketch had evolved into the entire mesh protocol. The same protocol now powering Loren's flagship product. And yet no signed contract. No bonus, no formal change in title, just vague language in Slack and promises like, "We'll make it official after Series B." You're too valuable to forget. He forgot anyway. I flipped to the back of the notebook where I used to jot down edge cases. Bugs too rare to explain, but too dangerous to ignore. There it was, scribbled sideways. Timestamp mismatch. If AWS fails between region 1 and backup node. Untraceable unless logged pre-sync. I was the only one who knew about that one. And it hit me, they weren't just disrespecting me. They were betting I wouldn't make noise, that I wouldn't risk my reputation or position, because I was the quiet one, the reliable one, the one who always stayed late without being asked. The next morning I walked into the office like nothing had happened. The same hallway, same industrial carpet, same forced smiles from product managers who thought Lauren's charisma could scale faster than code. But something in me had shifted. Not anger, not yet. Just an acute awareness that I had let them forget me, bit by bit, late night by late night, until I was no longer visible, just useful. I opened my terminal, checked logs. The last commit was mine. The last test run mine. And yet the system now listed Lauren as project owner in our internal portal. Someone had updated the access roles 2 nights ago. That's when I knew. They were rewriting history already. Prepping to scale without me. The same day HR sent out an announcement. We're excited to welcome new advisors to Brixton's Architecture Committee as we expand into Post-Series B. My name wasn't listed. Not even in the acknowledgements. At noon I took my lunch outside and sat on the back steps of the building. It was quiet, windy. There was a red coffee lid rolling along the concrete like it had somewhere more important to be. I took out my phone and opened an old email from 7 months ago, back when Lauren first pitched the project to me. His subject line read, "Need your brain on something that'll change everything." He had attached a PDF, early concepts, vague language, a sketch of a framework. He hadn't even called it a product yet. That email had no NDA, no IP clause, no language of assignment. I kept reading. At the bottom, a line that made my breath catch. "You're the only one who can pull this off. Let's build it together. I'll make it worth your while." No formal agreement, no IP transfer, and yet they'd already pitched it, signed investors, and started onboarding client trials. On top of my foundation. I looked out at the parking lot where my car sat like a question mark in the Texas sun, and then back at my screen. The product might have their name on it, but the origin that still belonged to me. And it was time I remembered that. Friday morning arrived with the weight of something unspoken. The office was quiet, that eerie calm startups get right after a funding announcement. Excited chatter replaced by closed doors and Slack messages suddenly becoming careful. I knew the pattern. I'd seen it before at a company 2 lifetimes ago, right before layoffs. But this wasn't about layoffs. This was about removal. At 10:07 a.m., I tried to access the main Git repo. Access denied. I stared at the screen. Error permission update. Contact administrator. I refreshed. Tried again. Same result. At first I thought it was a bug. Then I tried to open the core architecture doc I'd created during Sprint Week. It was still there but read only. Not editable. Not attributed. No longer mine. They didn't fire me. They just began quietly peeling me out of the product I built. Line by line. At 10:30 a.m., I walked into the DevOps suite and found our system admin Kevin. He looked up nervously. "Oh, hey, Nora, I'm locked out," I said evenly. "Core repo, also the architecture tree." He scratched the back of his neck. "Yeah, I was told access is being reorganized post-funding. Project roles are shifting away from the person who built it." He didn't answer, just stared at the ground like it held the escape route. I didn't press. He was a good kid. Just another person caught in Loren Beck's shadow game. By lunchtime, it was clear they were phasing me out without the decency of a conversation. No meeting, no memo, no explanation. Just silent locks and Slack channels I suddenly couldn't see. The kicker came when I opened the updated internal org chart. Under Product and Engineering, there was a new title, Technical Director, Adaptive Systems, Lucas Elroy, Lucas. A 26-year-old developer who had once asked me how to unfreeze a Git merge conflict without breaking the schema. He was bright, eager, but he hadn't written a single line of foundational code for the platform. He didn't know what the third layer of the predictive loop even did. And now he had my title, polished, rebranded, reassigned. I didn't storm into Lauren's office, didn't call HR, didn't send a fiery email. I went to the break room, poured a cup of stale coffee, and sat at the corner table, the one by the window, where no one ever looked. I stared at the skyline of downtown Austin, cranes in motion, buildings going up, steel and glass chasing the sun, fast, gleaming, temporary, much like Brixton Labs. At 2:00 p.m., I got the calendar invite. Subject: Roadmap Sync. Architecture plus Leadership Transition from Lauren Beck attendees. Lauren, Lucas, me. I accepted without comment. The meeting lasted 11 minutes. Lauren smiled the whole time. Lucas avoided eye contact like it was radioactive. Nora, Lauren began. You've been instrumental in getting us here. Truly, but we're entering a new phase: scale, compliance, external optics. It's time to shift the narrative. The narrative. He didn't say product. He didn't say structure. He said narrative because that's what mattered to him. Not the system, just the story he could sell. Lucas murmured something about inheriting responsibilities. Lauren patted his back like a coach giving a rookie the last 10 seconds of a blowout game. Then Lauren turned to me, smile tight. We'll find the right place for you in this next chapter. You've got great instincts. Maybe a technical advisor to product marketing. You'd be excellent in that space. I said nothing. Instead, I opened my notebook, flipped to the back page, and wrote 2 words. They laughed. Then I stood. I'll need a written statement clarifying my transition, I said calmly, for the record. Loren blinked. Of course. As I walked out, I heard him chuckle softly behind me, the same condescending laugh from the pitch room. The same one he used when he thought I had nowhere else to go. That night, I plugged in my personal drive. The one I hadn't touched in months. Inside it were folders I'd labeled during development: Nora Build Phase 1, Nora Logic Adapter 2, Diagnostics, Unresolved Cases. All time-stamped. All verifiable. I backed them up to a second location. Then I opened my old university laptop, slow-chipped corner but still functional. I wiped it clean, installed a local sandbox, loaded the core mesh framework. It ran perfectly, not because of their servers, not because of their system, because it was never really theirs. They locked me out of the product, but they forgot the one thing they couldn't touch. The author still had the manuscript. And now it was time to decide how the next chapter would read. 2 days passed. No announcement, no title clarification, no mention of me in any company-wide update. It was a textbook quiet erasure. The kind startups are built to pull off fast, clean, with just enough ambiguity to avoid accountability. Let someone leave without leaving until their absence feels natural. But I wasn't gone, not yet. That Wednesday afternoon, I called someone I hadn't spoken to in years, Camille Tran. She wasn't a friend, not exactly, more like a favor that had never been repaid. We'd met at a Women in Systems conference back in 2017. She was then a junior IP associate for a boutique tech law firm in DC, and we'd shared a 3-hour layover after our connecting flight was grounded. Somewhere between bad coffee and whiteboarding patent horror stories on a napkin, we'd exchanged emails. Now Camille was lead counsel at a mid-sized firm in Austin. Her bio said specialist in early-stage IP digital frameworks and technical authorship claims. I sent her one line, "Hey Camille, Nora Fielding here. I need 20 minutes and your discretion. IP question. Nothing dramatic, not yet." She replied in 5 minutes. "Coffee. Tomorrow, 9 a.m. Send the files first. I like to be mad before I get there." That night, I compiled everything. Not just code context, the initial architectural diagrams I'd drawn with my initials on each page, Slack logs where Loren referenced your mesh logic or Nora's predictive shell, the first prototype video with my voice walking through the integration points. Most importantly, that email, the one from Loren with the PDF attachment, vague language, no NDA, no IP assignment, just, "Let's build this." I zipped it, labeled it authorclaim docset1.zip, and I sent it. The next morning, Camille slid into the booth across from me at a quiet cafe near the South Congress Bridge. No greeting, just a raised eyebrow. "You're lucky I skipped yoga for this," she said, sipping her black coffee. "Also, I'm pissed." "That bad?" I asked. She tilted her head. "That good. If this is accurate, and I'll verify it all, of course, then what they're using now. Still legally yours." My throat tightened. Even without a contract. She nodded slowly. "Especially without a contract." Then she pulled out a yellow folder and slid it across the table. Texas intellectual property law defaults ownership to the creator unless explicitly transferred in writing. No signed IP agreement, no NDA, no documented assignment. She tapped the folder once. Then the origin remains with the author. I sat back. Let the words land. They hadn't just pushed me aside. They'd built their future on stolen ground. Camille continued. Now I'm not telling you to go nuclear. Yet. But if they've already taken funding on a platform they can't legally claim. She trailed off, letting the implications finish the sentence. I looked down at my hands. I wasn't shaking. Not anymore. Because this wasn't petty. It wasn't revenge. It was clarity. That evening back at my apartment, I pulled out something I hadn't touched in months. A little flash drive engraved with my initials, NF. My father gave it to me when I graduated from Rice with my master's in systems engineering. Put your name on what you build, he'd said, because one day someone will try to take credit for it. I plugged it in, opened a blank folder, labeled it Proof of Origin, Draft 0, and I began uploading each document, each version, each time-stamped traceable line of logic. Not to fight yet, but to prepare, because they thought they'd taken everything. What they didn't know was that I had never given it away. By Friday, the storm hadn't broken, but the sky had changed. Slack channels stayed quiet. Lucas stopped trying to make eye contact. And Lauren, he was too busy prepping for his product vision talk at a private investor retreat in Marfa. Perfect. While they crafted speeches, I finished building my ledger. I didn't go after them publicly, not yet. I went where the product lived to the client. The client was Redwave Trials, a clinical data firm in Colorado we'd soft-pitched a month earlier using a sandbox demo I wrote myself. I remembered the woman who'd asked the toughest questions on that call. Dana Elridge, head of systems integration. She'd grilled us on latency logic schema rollback and our compliance routing. And I'd answered everything, Lauren. He'd mostly nodded and dropped buzzwords like scalability synergy and biotech blockchain. I found Dana's email. It was still in my archive. Subject: great walkthrough. Really appreciate your clarity today. Hoping this moves fast. I stared at it a moment. Then I typed, Hi Dana, hope you're well. Just a heads up regarding the architecture powering the mesh demo. I'd appreciate a confidential 5-minute chat before your team commits further. This isn't about pricing, it's about authorship clarity. Let me know if you're open. I hit send. Less than an hour later, she replied, Nora, absolutely. I had some questions anyway. Can you do Monday, 11 a.m. MSIT that weekend? I drove out of Austin and stayed at a little Airbnb outside Dripping Springs. Just me, a quiet desk, and the folder Camille had reviewed Proof of Origin, Draft 1. I didn't sleep much, but not from panic. This time it was momentum, a quiet rhythm forming beneath everything. I thought about what Camille had said. You don't need to yell, Nora. Just make it undeniable. So I did. I spent hours building a clean timeline, visual, clear, verifiable. The original sketch from my notebook. Email exchanges with Lauren, referencing your mesh logic. Initial version control. Commits with my Git signature, deployment sandbox logs from my local machine. Slack threads with development decisions only I responded to. By Sunday evening, it was all uploaded to a private cloud folder, time-stamped, organized, and shared only with Camille and Dana. Monday, 11:00 a.m. sharp. Dana called. She didn't waste time. Nora, I appreciate this, but I need to ask, are you saying Brixton pitched us a framework that isn't fully theirs? I paused. No drama, just clarity. I'm saying the core framework is mine. Authored independently, never assigned in writing. And that their use of it is currently unverified. She exhaled sharply. That's a problem. I thought it might be. I saw your timeline, she said. It matches everything we were pitched almost word for word. Because I wrote it. She didn't speak for a beat. Then, would you ever consider consulting directly with us, outside Brixton? The question landed like a match on dry grass. I'd consider it, I said, if it came through the right channels, and with the right protections. Dana nodded, then dropped the last line like it was an afterthought, but it wasn't. Just so you know, we haven't signed anything final with Brixton yet, and we won't until this is resolved. That night back in my apartment, I pulled the flash drive from my pocket, set it on the table beside a pen, not just any pen, my mother's Parker. The one she used to sign every loan agreement, every rent check, every document when she started her bakery at 47. She used to say, "Don't just leave your mark, Nora. Sign it." I stared at that pen, then reached for my notebook. On the last page underneath the original sketch of the mesh architecture, I wrote, "They can rename it, but they can't reauthor it." And I underlined it once. Then I circled Monday on the calendar because the truth was no longer hidden. It was ready. The crash didn't start with a bang. It started with a forwarded email. Monday, 3:12 p.m., subject FWD, urgent, client concern. Red wave from Lucas Elroy to product leadership and accidentally, me. I opened it out of reflex and froze. Redwave's integration team had flagged a critical misalignment in the mesh rollout, timestamp conflict between the sandbox logic and the current live build. The fix, they didn't know, but they had one request. Please connect us directly with the original architecture author. There are decisions here we can't reverse engineer. That sentence sat there bolded by Lucas himself. The original architecture author, me. And Lucas had sent it to everyone, including me. 15 minutes later, I got a call from a restricted number. I let it ring twice before answering. Nora Lauren. His voice was calm, but not casual. The kind of calm that comes from someone realizing they might be holding a grenade by the wrong end. "We've had a small hiccup with Redwave," he said. "Totally normal for integration at this scale. Would you mind hopping on a call to help walk them through the schema inheritance logic?" I smiled silently. So now it was logic, not a few lines of code. "I thought Lucas had it handled," I said, voice even. Loren chuckled thin. "He's getting up to speed, but the legacy layers, well, they're uniquely yours." He didn't know I'd already spoken to Dana. Didn't know she'd seen the receipts. Didn't know Redwave was now waiting not for access, but for clarity. I let the silence stretch before I replied. "I'll think about it. If Redwave reaches out directly, I'll respond. But I'd prefer we don't blur the author lines any further." Loren didn't reply right away, then stiffly understood. He hung up. By the next morning, Camille had received a formal request from Redwave's legal team to verify intellectual property standing, just a due diligence sweep, they said. Camille forwarded me the email with a single note. "We didn't even send the cease and desist yet. And they're already unraveling." At 11:03 a.m., an internal memo leaked to several teams at Brixton effective. Immediately, all external communications regarding the mesh platform must be cleared by executive review. No exceptions. Translation, they were panicking. By 1:00 p.m., I started getting Slack pings from engineers I hadn't spoken to in weeks. "Hey, did you write the sync controller that handles prediction fallbacks? Do you know why the APAC sandbox is rejecting the latest deployment? Was the auth token supposed to expire weekly or monthly?" They weren't tagging Lucas. They were tagging me, and then the final spark. A Google alert I hadn't expected. TechCore Weekly startups scaling too fast. When code becomes a legal minefield, anonymized, but unmistakable. In a recent case, a promising startup faces potential rollback after failing to secure written ownership for its core framework, authored by a now displaced systems lead. As one investor said, "You can fake a team photo, you can't fake provenance, no names." But everyone at Brixton knew exactly who that story was about. At 6:17 p.m., Camille called. Her voice was low, steady. "They're not answering our pre-litigation inquiries. That's a good sign. They're afraid." I closed my laptop, took a long breath. The cracks weren't forming, they were spreading. And all I'd done was tell the truth. It didn't end with an apology. There was no confetti, no stage, no formal email from Loren or Lucas. No one said, "You were right." But I didn't need them to. Because by the time Brixton Labs held their emergency board session, Redwave had already signed a new contract. With me. The LLC paperwork was simple. Fielding Systems filed under my legal name. Camille helped expedite it. She even smiled when she handed over the EIN paperwork. "You don't need a firm to be the foundation," she said. "You just need to stop asking for permission to own what's yours." 3 days later, the Redwave team sent their onboarding form with my name listed as lead technical architect, independent consultant. No more product advisor, no more transition support, just the author at the top of the document. The real shift came the following Monday when I walked into Brixton Labs one last time. not as staff, as contracted oversight. RedWave's compliance team had insisted on a 3-party review session, one that included the current mesh system handlers, their legal team, and me. I arrived at 9:55 a.m., wearing the same blazer I'd worn the day I built the prototype. The reception desk paused. The new HR intern blinked. "Can I help you? I'm expected," I said, and nodded toward the conference room. Inside, Loren sat stiffly in a tailored shirt. Lucas fidgeted with his laptop. Their legal counsel barely made eye contact. I sat opposite them and opened my folder. Page 1, authorship timeline. Annotated, no anger, no revenge, just clarity. At one point during the call, RedWave's lead engineer asked a question about a logic handler inside the prediction loop. Lucas looked at me. I answered cleanly, briefly, with confidence. Then I added without venom, "You don't have to guess how it works." I wrote it. There was no reply, just quiet acknowledgement. When the session ended, I stood. Before leaving, I reached into my bag and placed a small object on the table. The flash drive, the one engraved NF I brought this 7 months ago, I said softly. "You didn't take it then. You can't take it now." Then I turned and walked out. That night, Dana from RedWave emailed me. "We reviewed the notes. Everything lines up. They've agreed to drop the original deployment and work directly with you moving forward. You're not just the lead, Nora. You're the source." I read it 3 times. Then I reached into my drawer and pulled out the old notebook. The last page still had the words I'd written weeks ago. "They can rename it, but they can't reauthor it." Underneath, I wrote one more line. "They built the pitch. I built the platform." A week later, Fielding Systems signed a second client. 2 engineers joined me remotely. I worked longer hours, but with a different kind of exhaustion. The kind that doesn't empty you, but builds something back. One evening, while debugging a deployment patch, I looked up and saw the flash drive still on my desk. Next to it, the Parker pen. My mother's words echoed back. "Put your name on what you build." So I did. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was taking something back. I felt like I'd finally arrived.